Hi there, I'm Sam from Simplilearn, and I'm very glad to walk you through this lesson about Route 53. So in this section, we are going to talk about basics of AWS, and then we're going to immediately dive into why we need Amazon Route 53. And then we're going to expand and talk about the details of Amazon Route 53, the benefits it provides over its competitors, and the different types of routing policy it has, and some of Amazon Route 53's key features. And we're going to talk about how to access Route 53, the different ways, the different methods you can access Route 53, and finally we're going to end with a wonderful demo in Route 53. So let's talk about what is AWS. Amazon Web Services, or AWS in short, is a cloud provider that offers a variety of services such as variety of IT services or infrastructure services such as compute power, database, content delivery, and other resources that helps us to scale and grow our business. And AWS is hot, AWS is picking up, AWS is being adapted by a lot of customers. That's because AWS is easy to use even for a beginner. And talking about safety, the AWS infrastructure is designed to keep the data safe irrespective of the size of the data. Be it small data, be it very minimal data, be it all the data that you have in terabytes and in petabytes, Amazon can keep it safe in their environment. And the wonderful thing and the most important reason why a lot of customers move into the cloud is that the pay-as-you-go pricing. There is no long-term commitment and it's very cost effective. What this means is that you're not paying for a resource that you're not using. In on-premises, you do pay for resources you're not using a lot. Meaning, you go and buy a server, you do the estimate for the next 5 years, and only after like 3 or 4 years you'll be hitting the peak capacity, but still you would be buying that capacity before 4 years. Right, and then you will gradually be, utilizing it from, 40%, 60%, 70, 80, and then 100. So what you have done is that even though you're not using the full capacity, you still have bought it and are paying for it from day one. But in the cloud, it's not like that. You only pay for the resources that you use. Anytime you want more, you scale up the resource and you pay for the scaled up resource. And anytime you want less, you scale down the resource and you pay less for that scaled down resource. Let's talk about why Amazon Route 53. Let's take this scenario where Rachel is trying to open her web browser and the URL that she hit isn't working. A lot of reasons behind why the URL isn't working. It could be the server utilization that went high. It could be the memory usage that went high. A lot of reasons. And she starts to think, is there an efficient way to scale resources according to the user requirements? Or is there an efficient way to kind of mask all those failures and kind of divert the traffic to the appropriate active resource or active service that's running our application? You always want to hide the failures, right? In IT, kind of mask the failure and direct the customer to another healthy service that's running, right? None of your customers would want to see a server not available, or none of your customers would want to see your service not working. Not impressive to them. And this is Tom. Tom is an IT guy and he comes up with an idea and he's answering Rachel, yes, we can scale resources efficiently using Amazon Route 53. In a sense, he's saying that yes, we can mask the failure and we can keep the services up and running, meaning we can provide more high availability to our customers with the use of Route 53. And then he goes on and explains Amazon Route 53 is a DNS service that gives developers an efficient way to connect users to internet applications without any downtime. Now, downtime is the key. Amazon Route 53 helps us to avoid any downtime that customers would experience. You still will have downtime in your server, in your application, but your customers will not be made aware of it. And then Rachel is kind of interested and she's like, yeah, that sounds interesting. I want to learn more about it. And Tom goes on and explains the important concepts of Amazon Route 53. That's everything that I'm going to explain it to you as well. Alright, so what is Amazon Route 53? Amazon Route 53 is a highly scalable DNS or domain name system web service. This service, this Amazon Route 53, it functions three main things, or it has three main functions. So the first thing is, if a website needs a name, Route 53 registers the name for the website domain. Let's say you want to buy google.com. You want to buy the domain name. Let's say you want to buy that domain name. You buy that through Route 53. Secondly, Route 53 is the service that actually connects your server, which is running your application, or which is serving your web page. So that's the service that actually, Route 53 is the service that connects the user to your server when they hit google.com in the browser, or whatever domain name that you have purchased. So you bought a domain name and the user types in your domain name.com, and then Route 53 is a service that helps the user to connect their browser to the application that's running in an EC2 instance or any other server that you are using to serve that content. Now, not only that, Route 53 checks health of the resource by sending automated requests over the internet to a resource. So that's how it identifies if there is any resource that has failed. When I say resource, I'm referring to any infrastructure failure, any application level failure. So it kind of keeps checking. So it understands it first before the customer notices it, and then it does the magic, kind of shifts the connection from one server to the other server. We call it routing. We will talk about that as we progress. So the benefits of using Route 53. It's highly scalable, meaning suddenly, let's say, the number of requests, the number of people trying to access your website through that domain name that you have bought, let's say it has increased. Route 53 is highly scalable. Right? It can handle even millions and millions of requests because it's highly scalable and it's managed by Amazon. The same thing, it's reliable, it's highly scalable, it can handle large queries without the users, without you interacting, without the user who bought it interact with it. You don't have to scale up. When you're expecting more requests, it automatically scales. And it is very reliable in a sense that it's very consistent. It has the ability to route the users to the appropriate application through the logic that it has. It's very easy to use. When we do the lab, you're going to see that. It's very easy to use. You buy the domain name and then you simply map it to the application. You simply map it to the server by putting in the IP, or if you can simply map it to another load balancer by putting in the load balancer URL. You can simply map it to another S3 bucket by simply putting the S3 bucket name or the S3 bucket URL. It's pretty straightforward, easy to set up. And it's very cost effective in a way that we only pay for the service that we have used. So no wastage of money here. So the billing is set up in such a way that you are paying only for the amount of requests that you have received, right? The amount of traffic, the amount of requests that you have received, and a couple of other things. The number of hosted zones that you have created, right? And a couple of other things. It's very cost effective in such a way that you only pay for the service that you are using. And it's secure in a way that access to Route 53 is integrated with the Identity and Access Management, IAM. So you only have authorized users gain access to Route 53. The trainee who just joined yesterday won't get access. And the contractor or the consultant, the third-party consultant you have given access, or who is using your environment, you can block access to that particular person because he's not the admin or he's not a privileged user in your account. So only privileged users and admin gain access to Route 53 through IAM. Now let's talk about the routing policies. So when you create a record in Route 53, record is nothing but an entry. So when you do that, you choose a routing policy. Right? Routing policy is nothing but it determines how Route 53 responds to your queries, how the DNS queries are being responded. Right? That's a record, or that's a routing policy. So the first one is a simple routing policy. So we use simple routing policy for a single resource. In other words, simple routing allows to configure DNS with no special Route 53 routing. It's kind of one-to-one. You use a single resource that performs a given function to your domain. For example, if you want to simply map an URL to a web server, that's pretty straightforward, simple routing. So it routes traffic to a single resource, example web server, to a website. And with simple routing, multiple records with the same name cannot be created, but multiple values can be created in the same record. The second type of routing policy is failover routing. So we would be using failover routing when we want to configure active, passive failover. If something failed, right, you want to fail over to the next resource, which was previously the backup resource, now the active resource, or which was previously the backup server, now it's an active server. So you would be failing over to that particular resource or that particular IP. If you want to do that, we use failover routing. So failover routing routes traffic to a resource when the resource is healthy, or to a different resource when the previous resource is unhealthy. In other words, anytime a resource goes unhealthy, it does all that's needed to shift the traffic from the primary resource to the secondary resource. In other words, from the unhealthy resource to the healthy resource. And these records can route traffic to anything from an Amazon S3 bucket, or you can also configure a complex tree of records. Now, when we configure the records, it will be more clear to you. So as of now, just understand that Route 53 can route, or this routing policy, the failover routing policy, can route traffic to Amazon S3 bucket or to a website that has complex tree of records. Geolocation routing policy. Now, geolocation routing, just like the name says, it takes that routing decision based on the geographic location of the user. Right? In other words, when you want to route traffic based on the location of the user, that's your primary criteria for sending that request to the appropriate server, we would be using geolocation routing. So it localizes the content and presents a part or the entire website in the language of the user. For example, a user from US, you would want to direct them to an English website, and a user from German, if you want to send them to the German website, and a user from France, you want to send those requests, or you want to show content specific to a customer who lives in France, a French website. So this is, if that's your condition, this is the routing policy we would be using. And the geographic locations are specified by either continent or by country or by state in the United States. So only in the United States you can actually split it to state level, and for the rest of the countries you can do it on a country level. On a high level, you can also do it on a continent level. The next type of routing policy would be geo-proximity routing. Geo-proximity routing policy, when we want to route traffic based on the location of our resource and optimally shift traffic from resources in one location to resource in another location, we would be using geo-proximity routing. So geo-proximity routing routes traffic to the resources based on the geographic location of the user and the resources they want to access. And it also has an option to route more traffic or less to a given resource by specifying a value known as a bias. Kind of weight, but we also have weighted routing, that's different. So we've chosen different name, bias. You can send more traffic to a particular resource by having a bias on that particular routing condition. And a bias expands or shrinks the size of the geographic region from which traffic is routed to a resource. And then we have latency based routing. Just like the name says, we use latency based routing if we have resources in multiple AWS regions, and if we want to route traffic to the region that provides the best latency at any given point of time. So let's say if one single website needs to be installed and hosted on multiple AWS regions, then latency routing policy is what is being used. It improves the performance of the users by serving the request from the AWS region that provides the lowest latency. So at any given point, if performance is your criteria, and at any given point of time, irrespective of what happens in Amazon infrastructure, irrespective of what happens in the internet, if you want to route your users to the best performing website, best performing region, then we would be using latency based routing. And for using latency-based routing, we should create latency records for the resources in multiple AWS regions. And then the other type of a routing policy is multi-value routing policy, where we can make Route 53 to respond to DNS queries with up to 8 healthy records selected at random. So you're not kind of loading one particular server. We can define 8 records, and on a random basis, Route 53 will respond to queries from these 8 records. So it's not one server that gets all the requests, but 8 servers gets the request in a random fashion. So it's multi-value routing policy, and what we get by this is that we are distributing the traffic to many servers instead of just one server. So multi-value routing configures Route 53 to return multiple values in response to a single or multiple DNS queries. It also checks the health of order sources and returns the multiple values only for the healthy resources. Let's say out of the 8 servers we have defined, one server is not doing healthy. It will not respond to the query with the details of the unhealthy server, right? So now it's going to treat it as only 7 servers in the list because one server is unhealthy. And it has the ability to return multiple health checkable IP addresses to improve availability and load balancing. The other type of routing policy is weighted routing policy, and in here we use to route traffic, or this is used to route traffic to multiple resources in a proportion that we specify. So this is an weighted routing, and weighted routing routes multiple resources to a single domain name or a subdomain and control the traffic that's routed to each resources. So this is very useful when you are doing load balancing and testing new versions of the software. So when you have a new version of the software, you really don't want to send 100% of the traffic to it. So you want to get customers' feedback about the new software that you have launched, new version or new application that you have launched. So you would kind of send only 20% of the traffic to that application, get customer feedback, and if all is good, then we would move the rest of the traffic to that new application. So any software launches, application launches will be using weighted routing. Now let's talk about the key benefits or key features of Route 53. Some of the key features of Route 53 are traffic flow. It routes end users to the endpoint that should provide the best user experience. That's what we discussed in the routing policies, right? It uses a routing policy, a latency-based routing policy, and geo-based routing policy, and then failover routing policy. So it kind of improves the user experience. And the other key feature of Route 53 is we can buy domain names using Route 53 console. We can buy it from here and use it in Route 53. Previously it was not the case, but now we can buy it directly from Amazon through Route 53, and we can assign it to any resources that we want. So anybody browsing that URL, the connection will be directed to the server in AWS that runs our website. Health checks. It monitors health and performance of the application. So it comes with an health check attached to it. Health check are useful to make sure that the unhealthy resources are retired, right? The unhealthy resources are taken away, or your customers are not kind of hitting the unhealthy resources and they see an service down page or something like that. We can have weighted round robin load balancing. That's helpful in spreading traffic between several services or servers via a round robin algorithm. So no one server is fully hit, or no one server kind of fully absorbs all the traffic. You can split and shift the traffic to different servers based on the weight that you would be configuring. And also weighted routing also helps with soft launch of your new application or the new version of your website. There are different ways we can access Amazon Route 53. So you can access Amazon Route 53 through AWS console. You can also access Amazon Route 53 using AWS SDKs, and we can access it we can configure it using the APIs. And we can also do it through the command line interface. That's Linux type Linux flavor AWS command line interface. We can also do that using Windows command line, Windows PowerShell flavored command line interface as well. Now let's look at some of the companies that are using Route 53. So some of the famous companies that use Route 53 are Medium. Medium is an online publishing platform, and it's more like a social journalism. It's kind of having hybrid collection of professionals, people and publications, or exclusive blogs or publishers on Medium. It's kind of an blog website, and that uses Route 53 for the DNS service. Reddit is an social news aggregation or web content rating and discussion website that uses Route 53. So these are some websites that are accessed throughout the world, and they are using Route 53, and it's highly scalable. Suddenly if there is a new news, right, their website will be accessed a lot, and they need to keep their service up and running all the time, more availability, otherwise customers will end up in a broken page, and the number of customers who will be using the website will come down. So it's very critical. Now these sites, these companies are very critical, they're being highly available, their page, their site being highly available, and the internet is very critical and crucial for them, and they rely and use Route 53 to meet that particular demand. And Airbnb is another company, Instacart, Coursera is another company, Stripe is another company that uses Route 53 as their DNS provider for their DNS service. They use Route 53 so their customers get best performance. They use Route 53 so their website is highly available. They use Route 53 to kind of shift the traffic between the resources, so their resources are properly used with all the weighted routing. The resources are properly used. Now let's quickly look at a demo. I'm in my AWS console and I'm in Route 53. So let me click on Route 53. So in this lab, we're actually going to simulate buying a domain name, and then we're going to create an S3 static website, and we're going to map that website to this DNS name, right? So the procedure is the same for mapping load balancer. The procedure is the same for mapping CloudFront. The procedure is the same for mapping EC2 instances as well. We're picking S3 for simplicity, right? But our focus is actually on Route 53. So let's go in here and we'll see if we can, right? We'll buy a domain name here. So let's first check the availability of a domain name called Simplilearn-demo-route53. Let's check its availability. It is available for $12, so let me add it to cart and then come back here. And then once you continue, it'll ask for personal information. Once you give the personal information, you finally check out, and then it gets added to your shopping list. Once you pay for it, Amazon takes like 24 to 48 hours to make that DNS name available. So the next stage would be contact details, and then the third stage would be verify and purchase. So once we have bought the domain name, it will become available in our DNS portal. And I do have a domain name which I bought some time back, and it's now available for me to use. So I can go to hosted zone and simply start creating. I can go to hosted zone, and then here it's going to list all the domain names for me. Right, click on the domain name and then click on the record set, and here I can actually map Elastic Load Balancer, S3 website, VPC endpoint, API gateway, and CloudFront, Elastic Beanstalk domain names, right? All that gets mapped through this portal. Quite simple, like 4 or 5 step button clicks, and then it'll be done. So I have an domain name bought, and then I'm going to go to S3, and I'll show you what I've done in S3. So I've created a bucket name called as DNS name. Let me clear the content in them. So I've created a bucket, and then permissions, I've turned off public access blocking, and then I've created a bucket policy. So this bucket is now publicly accessible. And then I went on to properties and created the static website hosting, right? And I've pointed that this is the file, that's my index file that I'm going to put, or name of the file that's going to be my index file that I'm going to put in this S3 bucket. So I've put the index file.html, saved it, and we're going to create a file now. We're going to create an index file. So this is a sample code. It says Amazon Route 53 getting started, routing internet traffic to S3 bucket for your website, and then a couple of other information. So I've saved it as an index.html file in my desktop. So let me upload that from my desktop into this bucket. So that's index.html and it's in capital I. So let me go to properties and go to static website hosting and make sure that I spell it properly, right? It's case sensitive, and then save it. So now this means that my website should be running through this URL, and it does. It's running through the static website URL. We're halfway through. So now let me go back to Route 53. Go back to Route 53, go back to hosted zones, go into the domain name, and then create a record set. And it's going to be an alias record. And I see my S3 static website endpoint there. Right, so click on it and create. It has now created an record that's pointing my domain name to the S3 endpoint that I have created, and my static website is running from it. So let me test it. Right, so let me go to the browser, put the domain name in there, and sure enough, the domain name, when my browser queried for the domain name, Route 53 returned a response saying this domain name is actually mapped to the S3 bucket, static website hosting enabled S3 bucket, and this is the URL for that static website hosting. And then my browser was able to connect to that S3 bucket and download the details and show it in my browser. Right, so it's that simple and pretty straightforward. Thank you for watching this video. I believe you enjoyed the content. We will meet again through another video like this. Thank you again, and bye for now.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.